Hello. Can y'all hear me? Hey, Anita. Perfect. Sounds like the audio works. This is my second time on Hopin, so hopefully all goes well, but I'm super excited to be here and start in a little bit. I will wait for maybe about 2-3 minutes until folks come to the session and get started. Hello. Hey, folks. How's it going? I am down in San Jose and it's foggy and rainy today, so that's that. But I hope everyone is having a good Sunday and enjoying Hack Duke. I'll wait a few more minutes. I only see 6 folks, so maybe let's wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. And I'll start sharing my slide deck. Perfect. Can everyone see it? Yay. Oh, looks great. Cool. There are a few more students trickling in, so I'll wait a bit. But essentially what we're going to be doing today is talking about starting your career at a startup. I started mine at a startup and I've never looked back. And you'll hear a bit more about my background, what has led me to human capital, which is where I'm working today. And we'll talk a bit about startups, their qualities, how to find one, and how to evaluate it, and talking a little bit, maybe looking further, how to think about career planning as well. And this is going to be a short deck. I really want this to be a lot more discussion based. I really want to entertain some questions, have some good discussions. So I'll keep the content pretty light and hope we'll spend a lot more time talking, discussing, answering questions and going from there. So I'll wait a bit. Maybe I'll start at 10:04 and kind of go from there. I can also see the chat room. So if you have questions, feel free to holler there. All right, I will go ahead and get started. All right. So wanted to start off by introducing myself a little bit. My name is Gelila, and I was born and raised in Ethiopia. This is going to be the longer version of my introduction since we have time today. I moved to the US when I was 15 and finished high school in LA. One of the things I really wanted to do post high school was just go far away from home. I kind of grew up in the shadow of my older sister, who is really smart, accomplished, and a doctor. And my family really wanted me to kind of follow her path. I went to Penn and loved my experience there. I was pre-med starting out, decided it wasn't really for me, and really enjoyed my econ classes. I thought I would be working at the UN or some sort of international entity. I spoke French and was really just fascinated by economic development topics. Post-graduation, I really missed home, came back to California, and actually got married and moved to the Bay. And that's kind of how I got started in technology. And as I was looking for opportunities, Coursera was a company whose mission I really was really excited about. Education had been a big part of our family values forever. And really loved the mission. So I joined when there were less than 50 employees. And at the time, I remember they were still trying to figure out monetization plans. They were doing price experimentation for their certificate product, which was their very first product launched. And I just loved the idea of being up close and personal and seeing how a business grows. My role there initially was doing recruitment coordination on the recruiting team, and then from there managing the internship program, going on campuses, recruiting interns, new grads for various engineering roles. And I did that for about 4.5 years and loved it. I kind of knew I wanted to stay at smaller companies and seeing their journey unfold. And so I had an opportunity to join Quora and lead the university recruiting team there. Enjoyed it for about a year, but I felt like I wasn't having as much impact in the roles that I had. I wanted to help students, all students, right? Like if you're recruiting for just one company, you're only evaluating a student for one opportunity versus sort of, I'll tell you more about what I do now. You're really helping them connect with great opportunities across different companies. And so when I heard about human capital, I knew I had to be a part of it. So I'll kind of move on to talk a bit about human capital and kind of what we do there. Human capital is a venture firm for ambitious engineers. We invest in companies that our members start or join after college. And currently we're managing over $250 million. I'm very proud to say this, that we have invested in 7 unicorns thus far, Snowflake being one of them. We wrote the first check into Brex, and our founders knew the Brex founders early at Stanford. They were actually the same year. So the idea and what we believe in is that great companies are started by great engineers. And so we want to be part of that journey with engineering students from the very beginning. So really starting in universities and colleges. And so what I do and what my team does at Human Capital is identify these great engineers on campuses, get to know them, understand what kind of impact they want to have in the world, and helping them find opportunities within our portfolio companies or other companies that we intend to invest in down the line. And most of these companies you probably might not have heard of. They're from, being a 10-person company to about 150, maybe 200. But the idea is to open up a lot more doors to students than normally available. So the conversation today is going to be about, if you are looking to start your career at a startup, what are some things that you should be aware of? Where can you find those opportunities? And perhaps sharing some frameworks that can help you evaluate them as well. Cool. All right, so let's talk by maybe stating that startups are not created equal. And what I mean by that, and I think this graph does a really good job of that, is that about 80 out of 100 startups never make it past the seed stage, meaning they never find product market fit, they run out of money, they don't have enough interest within the venture firm, they don't have enough, they don't have a proven case, essentially. They can't scale, etc. And so the hardest thing about starting a career at a startup is it's so hard to find those opportunities, and which company is great and truly has the right ingredients to be successful in the long term. So we'll talk a bit about that. And it's essentially, how do you go about identifying the companies that are in this really tiny percentile that are going to do very well down the line, right? Like, how are we able to place employee number 14 at Snowflake, at Robinhood, etc. And how are we able to do that? And I'll tell you a little bit. And it all starts with venture firms, other venture firms other than ourselves. So the idea is that the best companies are supported and backed by a handful of venture firms in the world today. Airbnb had the best support from General Catalyst, Google from KP, and Facebook from Funders Fund. And so what we do is essentially partnering with these top VCs in the space and working with them to identify high growth companies that are in their portfolio today, and of those which would need engineering talent in their organization today, mostly for new grad and interns. And so we really help them on that front by being the extension of a university recruiting team that they don't have in-house, and really helping them find some of the best engineers and providing, the additional support there. And from there, our members are able to join early stage companies, and perhaps we're able to sort of invest in those companies as well down the line. And that's kind of how the work and partnership happens at the top level. For example, Sutter Hill Ventures is one venture firm that we've worked with for the last 3 or 4 years, and we work really closely with them on the talent side. They have a couple of portfolio companies right now that we're helping for new grad positions, and those are companies probably that you haven't heard of, right? But whose main investor, Mike Spicer, is really bullish on. He's the one who incubated Snowflake, same with Pure Storage, and is just a beast when it comes to being able to bring great companies and bringing a great IPO as well. And so working with folks that are really smart, know what they're doing, identifying those companies, and kind of going from there. And we'll deep dive into sort of how to find and evaluate those opportunities as well. So the biggest thing for big companies, right, those are really easy. You go on their careers pages and you apply. And then for startups, there are a couple things that happen. You might have friends, roommates that have interned at that startup that are willing to give you a referral, which is great, gives you a higher chance to get an interview. Or you might be sort of on the web, looking at CB Insights, getting their reports, looking at which startups secured the most latest funding, etc. Crunchbase breakout lists. So these are a couple of different ways you can also be in the know when it comes to startups, right? Understanding which ones have just secured a round of funding, which generally means that they will have a good runway for the next few years, but also that the VCs are really believing in them and what they're looking to do. So kind of your work is a little cut out when it comes to evaluating them. And a lot of these also are links that you won't be able to access right now, obviously, but we'll find a way to make sure that a lot of these resources can make it to you as well. In terms of other resources that you can be a part of, I think newsletters are a huge one. They're also really cool because they're not like pages on pages where it's hard to like digest. So they're really fun content filled information that you can read through and just kind of understand which areas are being funded, which companies, which teams, which founders, etc., and kind of be in the know there. Again, like other accelerators that have newsletters. So a lot of these you'll be able to, if you can take a screenshot, you can also do that. Feel free to do that if you want to do that. But then from there, let's say you go through here, you find a great opportunity. You're like, okay, this is a company that's interesting. How do you go about actually deciding whether to apply there? And kind of go from there, and for yourself thinking this is a great place for me to start my career. The first thing that we say is really important is the founding team itself, obviously the founders. Generally, we believe that serial entrepreneurs have a higher likelihood to bring a company to success. You might have actually heard Jeff Maggioconda from the Coursera CEO doing the opening ceremony. He was brought in. I was around when he was brought in as the CEO. He was brought in after Rick Levin had left. And before that, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng started Coursera. And the biggest lesson for me there is essentially when it comes to founding a tech company and being at a startup, you want to make sure and feel comfortable that the founder is the right person to bring this company to success. 2 professors starting an ed tech company, I think makes sense, right? They have the expertise, but to scale a team and think about various monetization plans, etc., maybe not. And so looking at the founding team is really important. That the founder that's in place essentially can evolve with the company evolving. And not only do they understand the industry and the space really well, but they can work really effectively with the rest of the company to scale it and bring it to success, especially if we're looking at the companies like we were looking earlier, like the Stripes and the Airbnbs and all those. It really takes a lot of hard work to get to there. And so essentially you want to have confidence in the founding team to be able to bring the company to that level of success, right? The second thing is VC funding. If they've raised venture firm, not all VCs are created equal either. And so looking at who's really confident in them, and even hearing what the VCs are saying and why they decided to invest in them. Those are questions you can ask when you're on a call with a recruiter, or with a hiring manager, really understanding why is Sutter Hill really excited about you? Why is Sequoia excited about you? What do you think you will do better than your competitors? So I think asking a lot of those questions are really good for you to understand the potential of the company in the long term. Caliber of investors, again, like what's their track record and kind of looking there. And then again, also the market, understanding what the potential is in terms of market share, but also revenue over time. The second framework that we talk a little bit about is what we call the match framework. And this is where, let's say, you think that company's actually good, right? The startup is a great one where you should apply, you're excited. Generally, what I do is I walk students through this match framework, which is essentially figuring out what are the things that are really important to you that you should communicate to the company, right? And a lot of companies, especially when they're smaller, are very picky about who they bring in the process, because it's not like they have hundreds of engineers to conduct technical interviews. So they have a limited number of interviews that they can conduct to make one hire. And because of that, the top of funnel is very, the filtering system there is like pretty tight, right? It might be more competitive to actually get a job here at one of our companies versus like a Facebook or a Google. And that's the case for some of our companies. And so it's really important to start off the process by figuring out for yourself, what are some things that are really important, like that are deal breakers if they're not available within the opportunity that you're contemplating, right? So there are 5 areas that we look into. The first one is mission and product. Some students have to be working for a company that has a specific mission so that they can get behind that, or must be a product, consumer product, for example, and that's really important. There's some students that are like, I don't want to be at a B2B company, which I think is rare, but might say that. So those are some things that are important to you to look into. Personal and professional growth are also really popular. What I hear a lot of our members saying is they want to be at a company where they can learn the most, not just becoming the best engineer, but also learning about the business side of things, and growing their business acumen, right? And you don't have to be in those roles to really understand what it means to scale a team, the trade-offs of that you have to make when, I don't know, you do different experimentation around price or anything that has to do essentially with go-to-market challenges. And so there's a lot that you can be learning beyond just kind of being really good at that one little, particular space within engineering and technology in general. The third point is around the technology and the role itself. Most companies have a generalist new grad role, maybe perhaps full stack. Some are more particular and you're only on the back end. Some are just, particularly on the front end. So it's important for you to understand what kind of role you want, and if that's something that you want to optimize for. Again, you can't optimize for all these 5. The idea is that you identify 2 or 3 that are really important to you and actually flesh that out, right? If technology and role are important, what is it? Do you need to be at a company whose core offering is some sort of machine learning, and you want to be very close to that, or want to be in a machine learning role? That's a way to optimize for that. And so that helps you narrow down the companies that you're looking and applying for. Compensation and upside is also really important, like equity upside. Is that really important for you to make a certain amount of dollar amount because you have student loans or you're supporting someone in your family, etc.? And if that's the case, kind of really understanding from the very beginning sort of what compensation bands you're looking at for the companies you're applying to. For example, I think this is a good one to talk about, tech versus, being in a role, like a trading role, like hedge fund, being at a hedge fund, etc., like being a quant. trader, etc. So like I think it's really important to sort of understand also the difference there in compensation. And then lastly is humans. Like for some students, they get on a call with me and they say the most important thing for me is to work for someone who's amazing, and I just want to have a great manager who cares about me, who's very hands-on, and also like broadly like a team that has a positive culture, very collaborative, etc. And that's something that you can index on and can make it a bigger part of sort of how you look for it. So again, like these are 5 different areas that you can optimize for, that will help you inform how you should go about your job search. All right. This is the last section. Essentially here, I'm going to be talking about, in general, sort of how you should be thinking about your career. Like right now, you might be an undergrad, you might be wrapping up your master's, ready for a new grad job. Wherever you are, when you're thinking about your first job, especially right now, all you're thinking about, let me just get, an offer in hand that I feel good about, or contemplate between a couple and make the best decision. It's really important to just step back a little bit and think about your whole career, and maybe think about, where do I want to be in 5 years? Think about, what's the second job that I want? What's the third job that I want? That way, what you're making a decision around today, to a certain degree, maps out to how you should go about your whole career. And so that's something I always talk to students, right? If you are looking to become like a VP of engineering and just be a technical leader, some of the things you should optimize for today could be people and team, because I think being a good people manager, you need to learn from the best managers, and be at a company that has just great best practices, best engineering, just in general, like practices, right? And so how do you even set out for that, right? And that could be a conversation that you have with the recruiter you're working with, or any sort of career counselors that you may have. And so really learning, how do I go about planning my career, and how is my first job kind of fit into that larger picture is really important. So that's something I usually push students to think about. And part of that is also like, if you want to be a VP of Eng, like what's your ideal career? So being clear about that is really important. And I would also even say, like, if you have clarity around where you think your next 4 or 5 years, could lead you, it's important to voice that in the recruitment process with either the hiring manager, or if the last, interviews with the founder. Really being clear about and honest, as much as what you want out of your career. That way they can be an active part in helping you get there, right? If they don't hear from you that you're excited and interested in a leadership role down the line, they might not give you the opportunity to be exposed to it early on, right? They might be able to open up opportunities that will lead you there that might not be written down, right, as a benefit or a program, right? If you really want to work closely and be mentored, maybe a VP level engineer, which is very probable within a startup space, they could make that opportunity for you. And so it's just really important to voice how you think about your career and how you want your career to sort of grow over time. Again, like there's some students that ask me, hey, I want to go down a PM route down the line. Can you inquire with the company if that's something they encourage? And that's something you can own as well in your narrative around, what you want to be doing and sort of how you see that fit. And they could, again, give you opportunities that can help you exercise your muscle around those new skill sets, right? Third point, the technical challenges help you grow, right? In which way? And in terms of like, if you want to be the best technical engineer, what are some technologies that you want to pick up? Do you want to partner closely with a senior engineer to work on a very important project that's core to the company? Like things like that I think are really important to voice. That way, one, they know you're hungry and are looking to grow in your skill sets, but also they're bought in, essentially. It's not like a very transactional it seems like a transactional process when you're essentially signing an offer letter and joining a company, and you're essentially working, giving them hours, and you get paid. It's a lot more than that. There's very much a career development aspect of it. And to be able to really take full advantage of that, especially as a new grad, you have to be vocal about where you want to be, where you see your career growing, and kind of get there bought in into all of that. And your manager's job essentially is to develop you. And the more vocal you are and communicative, the better it's going to be for you. And the last point is sort of around the impact of the team within the larger organization. I think as a new grad or an intern, it might be, easy to kind of be heads down and focus a lot on getting the work that you're given perfect, right? That's should be part of what you strive for, but it's really also important to understand at a team level what your team is looking to do at their org level. That way you have a lot of perspective and can bring in ideas for how to improve things, but also can grow within the organization if you're seen as sort of a top partner with leaders across the organization. And so within startups, and from my experience at Coursera, what I've seen is the individuals that were the new grads and interns that were hired that took an ownership mindset into the work that they were doing and bringing in change definitely had the most impact in the organization and had the most opportunities to grow in their career and get promotions and kind of move into areas that they're interested in. But also I've seen really interesting career transitions, actually, now that I think about it, within sort of, I think we're around like the 200-ish size. I had my colleague who's a recruiter move into a user researcher role, for example. I've seen engineers going into a PM role. I've seen a PM with a technical background go into engineering work. And so what I'm trying to say is, the culture within the company is really important, but I'm also saying, it's really important to be true to what it is that you care a lot about and kind of be there for your own voice to say, hey, like these are the things that are interesting for me, and kind of be diligent about it. And I know earlier in your career it might be hard to do those things. So wanted to just kind of share some encouragement and motivation to everyone that might be, looking to start an internship soon or preparing to start a new grad job. So wanted to share a few things. This kind of concludes the presentation that I had prepared. I wanted it to be not too long so that I can allow time for questions and discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the room and maybe see what questions people have. I haven't looked at the chat room yet, so let me go ahead and look at that. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, but I'll give maybe people some time to think about any part of the presentation that they might have questions, or if there's any area that you want me to expand a lot more, I'm more than happy to do that as well. If you have questions about any of your interview prep, etc., let me know as well. I've done like hundreds, lots of interviews, so happy to do that as well. Okay, I have a question for Charlotte. How do nonprofits or startups with a focus on social good who might not be making a large profit fit into the venture scene? Oh yeah, that's a great question. So generally, so let me give you some background on Coursera and how we got started. So essentially, when I joined, Coursera started as a nonprofit. And over time, there were discussions around what they should be doing to essentially still be around. They had to pay people. We had engineers from Stanford that dropped out of grad school building the very first version of the platform, etc. And for us to essentially continue offering what we're offering, we had to monetize. And so that's kind of when we went off and raised venture, and Kleiner Perkins were one of our main investors, and NEA became another one as well. And with that funding, what we essentially did was we were able to expand our course offering. We were able to have a lot more university partners outside of the US and kind of double down on those efforts. We ended up launching industry partnerships with Google, for example, where we were able to do a Google certificate where someone with no technical background could essentially take this course work with Google in partnership with Google, content created by Google, and apply for some of the IT entry-level jobs there. And that was like a less than 12 months program. So we were able to double down in areas where we could essentially be able to have a lot more impact in our mission. And so that made sense for the company, for us to kind of raise fund, be able to grow and continue. And we really did see a business opportunity there. And so within our portfolio, all of our companies that we're working for are for profit. Does that answer your question, Charlotte? Perfect. What else are we curious about? I'm just curious. Where is everybody at? Like, what year? What are y'all? Where are you in the process for recruitment? Are you kind of like putting it off until the new year, like busy with finals? How can I be most helpful, and sort of where you're at in your perhaps job search, or preparing for maybe final rounds interviews at companies perhaps in the next 2-3 weeks before the holidays, or making a decision around offers that you may have in hand? Nothing? Junior. Okay, perfect. Oh, perfect. Thanks for sharing, Charlotte. Yeah. How to find places to work with a focus on social and environmental good. What I would say is there might be I don't know, this might be a bit controversial, but I know within like Facebook and like larger organization in general, within big tech, there are sub teams that are dedicated to certain causes. Social, it could be environmental. So I've always thought it was really interesting whenever I learned about specific teams within those companies that are working on almost like social good initiatives. So I think it's worth also checking and learning more about sort of what those teams could be. One way to think about that is go on LinkedIn and you can do a very simple search. You can essentially look for people that have social good and their title at Facebook, and it will come up. Same thing with other companies. I think there's a lot that you can do with LinkedIn, and I from my experience, a lot of students haven't really played around with it. So I would say play around with it for larger companies and see what roles, positions look like there. And once you find those organizations or sub teams within companies, I would say feel free to reach out. I don't think there are enough students that are doing cold outreach and reaching out in general on LinkedIn. A lot of my recruiter friends and myself, like, we don't have enough, I think, interest from students essentially asking for more information. And the culture within tech in general, at least here, like in the Bay Area, is for most recruiters and like most hiring managers that are in position of hiring, it's part of our job and how we're evaluated to actually essentially help you, but also hire on the companies, like our full-time job. So we wouldn't be so opposed to it to help you out. So I would say just kind of encouraging you to be comfortable with sharing a little bit about your background and learning more about what opportunities would look like within those companies. And I think a good template for cold outreach can be very short and sweet to the point, and go ahead and do that. Yeah. Any advice on finding jobs that balance technology and working with people, more social, not just software programming? Yes. If you have a SWE background, if you have a CS background, which you do, there are opportunities that are non-technical. I am actually currently hiring for a new grad position. It's not an internship, but it's called a product operations manager role at Scale AI that I'm looking to hire for. So if you know new grads that are interested in that, let me know. My email is just my first name at human.capital. Shameless plug for that. But essentially, the role is to be embedded in one of their product teams and working really closely cross-functionally to bring new sort of launches to life. So that's kind of what your background, what your responsibility is. And they're looking for computer science backgrounds because it's important to really understand technology, working with engineers, but also have the soft skills to be able to communicate effectively across different stakeholders. So those are like different type of roles that you can be looking into, Charlotte. So that's and the best way I would say is learning more about how to interview for those, like the PM roles, the technical program manager roles, TPM roles as well at larger companies, and kind of go from there. For new grads, I think, and especially as an intern, it's going to be really hard to find those. But as a new grad, they're not too many, and they're usually very competitive. So I would say, like, if you end up getting an internship, let's say as a SWE this summer or next spring, find an opportunity to maybe spend, I don't know, 30 minutes weekly with someone who's doing like a TPM role, a PM role, and learn more about their world and what they're looking to do, so that, you know, down the line when you're applying for a full-time role, you at least have some idea for what the requirements and the roles look like, and they'll give you a ton of pointers as well. So that's also another way to learn more about them. The answer is always talking to people, talking. So finding the opportunity to learn more about sort of what their world looks like and how you can best prepare for opportunities like theirs at different companies. So they can even give you more pointers there. Sam, thank you. I am a senior undergrad looking for full-time jobs. Okay. Should you apply for jobs at startups if you don't have quite meet their... For startups that don't have a job description online for a new grad role, that means they're technically not hiring, but doesn't mean you shouldn't reach out to them. So if you feel like you're uniquely qualified to interview with them, I would definitely say send them a cold outreach and say, hey, but that has to be very compelling, especially if it's the founder that's reading it. Read a little bit about on their blog post, learn more about them, and say one thing, two things that resonate with you and why they should essentially start a conversation with you. It could be a research project that you did undergrad that aligns with what they're working on. It could be the technology that they're leveraging and how much you really believe in that, or it could be the person himself and why you think you should work for them. So like, I think there are angles that you can use to essentially position yourself to sound like, you know, you are the right person for that. So I think that's really good. Yeah, and then they always have preferences for master's, PhDs, etc. I would say just still reach out. There are a lot of people that are unqualified that apply that I probably won't respond to. But if somebody sends me a note on LinkedIn and follows up, or an email and says, hey, and like re-engages with me, shows me that they're really interested. So I would say, you know, it's always really important to go above and beyond to show your excitement for opportunities. I think that's something I'm not seeing enough of students these days. I think students kind of do this pray and pray method where they apply and kind of just see what happens and respond to. So I think for each, you know, for you, you're applying for a lot of places, but for each company, they're just hearing, they're one company, and so they expect excitement from everybody else. So it's really important, to personalize as much as you can your job application, so that the companies themselves feel like they're lucky to have you as an applicant. So it could even be like when you respond to confirm an interview, like showing excitement, because people will say something, right? The recruiting team is not going to be that big, right? So it's just really important to show your excitement at every stage of the process. Keep reiterating why you're the best person for the job, talking about the relevant things that you've worked on, and kind of go from there. I hope that answers your question, Sam. And then, Sam, why don't you email me? So my email is right here. Why don't I actually do this? I will share a link where you can fill out the form and kind of go from there. This is also my email if anybody wants to get in touch with me. And then I'm gonna stop sharing as well. That were a lot like rapid fire questions y'all asked me. Any recruiting related questions, doesn't have to be about startups either. Sam, you can reach out to me, and maybe we can set up a time to get to know each other and help you in your process for full-time recruitment. So feel free to do that. If anyone else perhaps is close to making a decision, has opportunities, and still doesn't know what to do, let me know, and we can discuss that in public. No, I'm kidding. I can share what I know. I'll give it maybe a few more minutes. If no one puts a question in the session chat room, then maybe I'll call it a day. Do you think coding interviews where you have to solve algorithm are worthwhile to study for, and how many jobs do you think still require them? Yes. I mean, across the board for our companies, and I've, doing recruitment at Coursera and Quora, the first step is algo coding. Algorithms, data structures, your basics, fundamentals for CS is something that you're going to be asked for, I would say, a pretty high percentage of jobs within technology. So study for those. And I think something to also do, like, honestly, a lot of this is like, by the way, interviewing is all about preparation, right? If you don't know already, I'm sharing that. But because it's all about preparation, make it fun. Like, have a study group, like schedule Zoom calls weekly, maybe with your friends, your roommates, and try and get better at it. Because at the end of the day, for you to do well and secure those internships and new grad opportunities, you have to do well preparing for these, right? It's like SATs, ACTs. So like, be heads down, like give yourself time. Oh, that's another thing too. Like, a lot of times when I help students get an interview at these companies, they're not prepared yet for interviews, and they might not have been upfront with me. And so they kind of blew off one interview. And so it's like, take the time that you need, spend, commit to doing X hours of interview prep each day, make it fun, form student groups, student study halls, whatever, and make it fun and do it and quiz each other. Because at the end, it will really matter. It will show that you've prepared and you can crush your interviews. So that's one. Another type of questions that I'm familiar with is also systems design. I know some of our companies require it. So that's something to maybe learn more, dig deep into systems design. Some companies at Quora, we used to do these things called practical, where even as an intern, you would be would share with you the code base, like an actual real code base, and we expect you to do things like live. So there's a bug that you have to fix, there's this that you have to do, etc. And so that requires like essentially almost like very close to what real software engineering work will look like, and go from there. And usually companies would call those practicals. What else? And then there's always an aspect that will be behavioral. And the behavioral interview, it could be with a recruiter, it could be with a hiring manager, like an engineering manager, like a VP, head of engineering, founder, depending on sort of how big the company is. It's actually really important to prepare for this. A lot of students, I think, go into these, especially if it's with a recruiter, might think, oh, the recruiter is just like taking data point, like writing. It's actually like you can miserably fail your whole interviews if you mess this up. So I think it's really important to also have very concise answers for why you're interested in the company and the role. You should clearly be able to walk someone through your background and your story and have some narrative around that. You should have a good question bank. Have questions about the company, the role, very questions that show that you're informed, that you've read, that you've done your homework. So those you should always have for each company. And every time you're on a call, you should have that open. And depending on who the person is, like having the right question, asking the right question makes sense, right? So that's really important. What else? But yeah, the short answer is yes, study for algo coding and data structures. What has recruiting been like for a recruiter's point of view this year with COVID? It seems like recruiting is a little harder this year and some companies seem slower at getting back to students. Yes. So from what we understand, and I've seen most students, is that even if students have done internships, they might not get and have like positive reviews. In August and September, a lot of students were telling me, hey, I didn't get a full-time offer because of headcount. So that's interesting. So essentially, the students had like on aggregate less offers because of that. And then just like for new grad recruitment, I think there are less opportunities right now, especially because companies you're essentially hiring for 6 months, 8 months out. And you might not know what your need looks like that far out, especially if you're not doing I don't want to say you're not doing well financially, but if you're want to be conservative. And right now, a lot of companies are conservative, unless you're like one of our portfolio companies and you have just raised a significant amount of funding and you have a good runway. So I would say generally my advice has been either join a company that has a bunch of money in the bank and essentially can guarantee a pretty good runway for the next few years, or be at an established company that is doing well, has proven, product market fit, is not in any way affected by COVID or any sort of right now economic situations. I think that would be my recommendation. Because I think prior to this, a lot of students didn't have to think about the business side of joining a company. A lot of students, of course, saw Lyft and Airbnb and all these places being great places to work, which is the case, right? They have great engineering teams. But, when it came to COVID, they all did horribly. I had students that had their new grad offers rescinded earlier this year, that I was trying to help. There's just a lot that happened. So I think within this context of COVID, it's so important as you're evaluating opportunities that you're not just thinking, okay, I want to be the best engineer, but really understanding the business of the company, and sort of what the risks are, what are the big bets they're making, and how that affects COVID. But yeah, you're right. It seems like recruitment is a little harder this year, which I think means you just have to be more creative, honestly. One thing I can tell you is that we're doing really well. As a venture firm at Human Capital, we're doing really well. A lot of our portfolio companies are doing really well. There are businesses that are crushing it right now. So I think there needs to also be an emphasis on just being creative and identifying those companies that are doing well, partnering with places like human capital or others to really just have a better bearing and understanding of like how the market is doing and what companies are doing better, because you can be very creative. My job essentially is to always have great engineers in my network. So if I pass on like getting to know you now, like I'm not doing a great job. It doesn't serve me any point. And so same with other recruiters. So feel free to like send cold outreach and get to know people, even if they're not hiring, right? It's always good to have to make a connection. And you don't always just have to reach out to recruiters too. You can reach out to the hiring managers. If it says engineering manager in their title, most likely they're involved in hiring. And part of, again, like they're being evaluated on how good of a recruiter they are, right? That's part of their job. So feel free to reach out to people, right? And they'll respond, right? And even if they don't respond, let's say you send 50 and you have a cadence to do those and only one person responds and it's positive, I think that's worth it. So to a certain degree, I think students have to be also very creative and sort of reaching out to individuals, getting to know companies, and kind of going from there. And one last thing too to add is if you have friends that are crushing it and doing well with recruitment, and having great experiences, or have interned places where you're curious, interested in, like have that conversation, and ask them, what they're doing, what could be helpful, if they can refer you, if they know other students or other students in their networks that they know. I'm sure with HackDuke too, you've met with a bunch of other fellow engineers, right? Keep those connections, reach out to them, have a cadence, be meaningful and intentional in your conversations, because if they're ambitious individuals, tomorrow they're going to be, engineers at companies that you'd want to be interested in. So I think it's also really important to maintain your relationships today so that, over time, when you're looking into other opportunities, they can also help you in getting to where you want to be or giving you referrals, because it's all about your network. To give you an idea, like even at Human Capital, like today, I essentially convinced one of our early executives from Coursera to come in and do a bunch of like amazing work for us that's needed in our company growth right now. And so your network is everything. And she was someone that I didn't even work with. I was, managing a engineering internship program. She was head of operations, so like overseeing our learner operations, partner operations, community groups. Like our work literally had no overlap at Coursera, like no overlap. But the moral of the story is you have to build relationships with people within your organization. And now she's essentially, like, because of me, she's advising us at this company, because one, like I've had great impression on her early on, and she feels like she's, I'm someone that she wants to work with, and she feels confident in the company that I'm joining. She wants to be a part of that. And obviously things worked out well. But the moral of the story is, you might be a new grad or an intern at a company, and you're like, oh, I'm this little, student trying to get it right at this company. But a lot of times people look at the work that you're doing and your impact is going to be felt. So it's just really important to build relationships with people and maintain them over time, so that because that is going to be your currency in your career. So I hope this resonated with some of y'all, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. But thank you so much for your time. Let me know if there's maybe one last question before we end this session. I've been rambling for a long time, so I'll take a break now. You're welcome, Charlotte. In the last few minutes, what I'm going to do is try and pull up a form so that I can have y'all at least fill it out so we can keep in touch over time. If not, you have my email. Oh, perfect. I found it. So this is If you can, you're very welcome, Anita. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. I just shared the form. Fill out the form. It will ask you for a couple of questions. But this is the best way for us to keep in touch together. So thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm always game to talk about career startups, so holler.